many times speech or talking is a substitute for action. It's like when you don't have children, like the main argument against having children that I get from my friends who don't have children is, well, look at you, man. You don't sleep. You have no time to watch soccer with us, get drunk with us, go out with us, go on vacation with us. Like you basically gave up all your freedom, your personal freedom, and you are now a caregiver. I think, I don't know. You have to take care of this fragile creature, and that's like 90% of your focus, and what's left is maybe to focus on your relationship. Which is, it's basically the same argument against a relationship. If you're in a relationship, it's like limiting your diet to one ingredient. It's the opposite of diversity. It's the opposite of, it's less spontaneous. It's more reliable, but it's like it comes with always, it's like whatever advantages a relationship provides and having children provides, it provides just as many disadvantages. So I always say, like, the main argument for having children is that, as far as I can tell, it's like the only way of experiencing unconditional love, right? Because with a partner, if my partner sleeps with a different person, it's like that's not a, I will not unconditionally love her forever, if she messes around and all of that, you know what I mean? Like, there's this kind of bind in a relationship, but when it comes to your child, it's like, it's not like whatever they want is fine, but ultimately, I guess, because I can't tell, like, he might do some crazy shit later on in life, right? Which won't make me very proud and very happy, but I guess that relationship, father-son or father-daughter, will always be above anything, basically. It will be unconditional. Now, but the other pro-child, pro-parenthood argument, which is, I think, just as powerful, is that it gives you this, because it provides transcendental meaning, something that you are invested in, a being that you are invested in beyond your own lifespan. It provides you focus, it really you may say it limits your goals or your perspective, but that quote unquote tunnel vision, it's not a tunnel vision. It also, it turns you, like, it makes you focus, period. Like, that's it. And it gives you clarity. It provides clarity. That's the point. I think that's like the most profound cognitive transformation that you can experience. At least in my case, it's like all of a sudden there's like this pyramid of needs that becomes so clear. Whereas, if you don't have it, you may be thwarted to I don't know, fulfill your true potential or whatever, because of all these sideshows which you could pursue, but which aren't as transcendentally meaningful as being fully invested into some sort of transcendental future, I guess.
That's I think the clarity is like a really great word, actually, like etymologically speaking, because it comes from like claritas, which meant like brightness of form. Like, it's kind of like the true nature of something shining through. And like true freedom is found in obedience to one's purpose, or something like the telos. That's like a,
it's like a paradox, right? That true freedom is not to have infinite options, which are in fact not empowering, because they paralyze you. They make you like, that's anxiety provoking. If you go online, you have too many options. If they're not in some sort of hierarchy, you don't know what to look at.
And it also reminds me of Peterson talking about, like, when you said now you're responsible to this kid, it's like responsibility is where, that's kind of his slogan, maybe a little bit oversimplistic, but I think it's still good. It's like responsibility is where you find meaning in your life. It's like, and
there's also a Plato quote, which is something like, the world is not here for you, which is sort of the modern young generation's worldview, but you are here for the world. And in some sense, so you have this cosmic burden, cosmic responsibility.
And I think you're right in saying that, having children is, I want to reiterate that I think it's beautifully said the way that you put it, to experience that transformative, unconditional love. Like, I also, and this boundary dissolution that we're talking about, it, like, I kind of think about this as like another way of phrasing that is to, that's the way, that's one of the most reliable ways to uh, to to uh, to experience and bump up against the divine, like, regularly. You know, a lot of people will say God is love.
So the goal is not to bring back Christ as he was, or Plato as he was, or Seneca or whomever, or the Buddha, because it's like, what's the point? Like they're not gonna fix things at scale, and we have to fix things at scale.
It's like the Normandy invasion. Right? World War II was effectively over that day, yet there was still a lot of work to be done before the war was definitively over. Same with now until the end of time. The battle's been won on the cross, but now we have the privilege of getting in the army of the crucified and risen Lord, and to, you know, do the mop-up work.
How do you mediate that paradox?
We do it with a kind of panache and confidence, because we know the definitive battle's been won. We're in the last act of a 5-act play, I would say. Creation, followed by the fall, followed by Israel, so God's rescue operation. Israel coming to its climax in the coming of the Mashiach, and now Act 5 we're in, which is the mop-up work. Now we join the army of the Mashiach, and then we do our bit to increase good and decrease evil, you know? So we have to know what part of the play we're in. That's very important. We're in Act 5, but the previous 4 acts have to be understood clearly, or we won't know what we're doing in Act 5.
If I could just add one more thing, is that...
Yeah, that the kingdom is at hand. He's like, he basically is like, yo, the Logos is at hand, you know? and I and the Logos are one because I'm paying attention to the Logos, you know? And so we can all do that. And that's how I think Christ 2.0 will look like, is that people shall become as gods. And what does that mean? It means to rule. It means to kind of become a standard by which other people judge themselves and like orient themselves around, kind of like you were saying with these archetypal figures, which arises, you know, because that was the way that in the old world, it was the gods were the stars, right? And the stars will organize the things. And I think there's a way.
Do you think Peterson is Christ 2.0?
I think we can see Christ 2.0 in Peterson, you know, but I think we can also see it in you and me, you know. Humble as I may or may not be.
Most Christians would disagree with you, I think.
I think we could see it in everybody. You know, I think it's just a general phenomenon which is happening with the Logos is, and what does it mean for the Logos to shine through you? It's for you to be who you are. You know, it's for you to be, it's the essence of you. You know, it's like yeah.
But how does that save the world from the apocalypse?
Because what that is it's your true purpose. And like what we were saying about having kids, is that when we submit to our true purpose, who we are, you know, this restriction to focus on who I'm meant to be in my, you know, who I'm ordained to be or whatever, by my biology, by my, you know, my interests and stuff, like all that, like to maximally participate in who we, you know, who we are called by God to be, you know, and yeah. And in that we also find true freedom as well. Easier said than done.
I'm thinking about what you're saying in the context of the Avatar Revolution. In some sense, that's exactly what the Avatar Revolution would be. I mean, you fall back onto the Logos, onto the Word, in order to create personifications of the kind of person you just mentioned. And they would be much more perfect, I mean, by definition, than us. And it doesn't mean that they would be flawless, which is also like not necessarily the definition of an ideal being, or a personification of an ideal, whatever it is, an ideal leader or whatever. But yeah, what I find, what I always struggle with is this one Peterson clip that I have on my channel, where he's like, you know, the Bible is true in a meta sense. You know, it's like it's the precondition for truth.
I think he might have gone too far there.
Which version of the book of Scripture? You know what I mean?
So what's the proposition here? Well, I think when we describe these frameworks of perception, the name we give to the description of a framework of perception is a story. And I think the reason that we like stories so much is because we need to establish frameworks of perception.
Wait a minute.
The Bible is true in a very strange way. It's true in that it provides the basis for truth itself. And so it's like a meta-truth, right? Without it, there couldn't even be the possibility of truth.
Complete nonsense.
I'm not a huge fan of the Bible in general. You know, like I think people are
But you
idolatrous.
believe that the vision, but that you believe that the vision that is conveyed in it will manifest itself.
Not because it's in the Bible, though, because it seems to be the case.
Okay, be a good person again, you know, and basically do everything that Peterson says. It's like,
Well, I'm saying like do miracles. I'm saying be Christ in the world. You know, like be a God. You know, and like be an organizing principle that other people orient themselves around. You know.
okay, so you're basically saying something like I'm saying, you know,
Yeah.
we should feed the people our ideals they can embody. Basically, blueprints for incarnation, if you will.
And
Like,
also,
this is
like,
the ideal
for-
soldier, this is the ideal teacher, this is the ideal parent. We somewhat do perhaps the idea of Christ is the ideal individual. That's like the poetic personification.
Yeah, it's like
this is the guy you
divine
should follow.
humanity.
So what does a non-transhumanist
Okay, yeah.
Spider-Man look like?
Okay, I think it would be somebody who's like, you know, exercising people, maybe that looks like Jordan Peterson, you know, baptizing people through YouTube videos type of thing. And I think, or maybe that would be somebody doing actual healing. Maybe it would be raising kids. You know, like, I think you can be a Christ-like individual.
Yeah, but
without
basic
you don't have to,
question,
like, be on the cross, you know?
if we all followed Christ, then there would automatically some sort of real world Spider-Man and Iron Man and Batman and whatnot emerge. Christian role models, but for our time.
Yes.
Who's
Yeah.
going to create them?
Well, I also think we have like spiritual faculties. You know, I think like we'll be able to like exercise people of spirits. I think it'll look like a lot like Jordan Peterson, actually.
There's no ideal chancellor. Like, that's actually, you know, one of the projects I'm working on is like the ideal chancellor. What you're prescribing is a religious transformation at scale of politicians.
Kind of, yeah. Like, I think like maybe there's an amorphous thing where it's not that you're gonna find like somebody who is, oh yes, this is the second coming of Christ, this human being. You know, I think it's more so that it happens through people kind of at times. You know, like sometimes you really see somebody, you know, that is just a shining example of, and we can't help kind of following it, you know. And that's kind of what I try and do on my YouTube channel as well, to some extent, which is that like I try and look for those moments where I see through my lens, you know, the logos shining through somebody. Because part of that as well is organizing our attention to be aware of those things, you know, such that we keep an eye out for
the mighty event that lies ahead of us, the reappearance of Christ Jesus, taking place gradually, at first only for a few, then for more and more human beings.
People who are, you know, like I think there's something really inspiring about you being a father, for example, you know, and just like just to do those kind of things is can be a big thing, you know.
It's not clear that you should go all in on a singular ideal.
It's like the through
It's not
line.
one person.
Yeah. The personalized like Jesus Christ and following him as like an individual, like to the way that he presented and says this is the way. Like I don't know. I have trouble talking about this stuff. I'm not very you know, practiced in it. It's the through line of all the various sub personalities kind of thing. I wish I could offer you an articulate
Let me approach
response
it.
here.
I think this is the best way to understand love. Love is the capacity for unity within diversity, or the capacity for diversity within unity.
It's a lack of imagination of how Christ would manifest himself in your specific context. It's your ideal. It's the ideal. It's not your personal ideal. It's the universal ideal of man. Okay? But how do you approach that ideal?
You don't have to know about Jesus to be Christ-like.
Now, how do I assume maximal responsibility? Should I max that out? Is maxing out the assuming of responsibility that which I should do? And he says, yeah, well, start small, start within your most local space, clean up your room, take care of basically yourself and your surroundings before you take on the world.
I think about that responsibility as to participate in God, basically. Like, we have a responsibility to participate in reality deeply as possible, basically. And and that means, like, let's say evolution is working through us, to participate in evolution and to not like retreat from our encounter with the world, to suffer that, the word suffer just means to go through, to suffer participation in the real. And when I think about that, that just makes me think about the cross. It's like, that's maximal participation. But even not necessarily going all the way there, it's Christ would say, love God and love your neighbor. Like, that's kind of, if there's one way to sum up,
that's it, and that's it, really.
If there's one way to sum it up, it's love God and love your neighbor. Yeah, and he says all the rest of the laws of the prophets hang on
gonna
these.
fix shit? Who's gonna fix shit?
Huh?
Who's gonna fix shit?
Well, loving, what does it mean to love? It doesn't just mean happy, nice feelings. It's like, sometimes it looks like self-sacrifice and
Yeah, but how do you know what to fix? Like, that's kind of the thing. It's like, there was no one there to tell me what to do in my context. But if there had been, it's to some extent like a pointless conversation, because it's different for each. But if the call to responsibility is to just do basic things,
well, I think everybody,
it's
not. It's different for everyone. Everyone's called to love God and love their neighbor differently. Such that, like, for some people that.
Yeah, but that's why I'm saying, how does it look like in your personal context? You know what I mean? And how do you know that you actually love your neighbor? If extreme case, and it has nothing to do with my political inclinations, you let your country be overrun by illegal immigrants, for example. Should you love your neighbor enough to save him from, the Mexicans who send us all their criminals and rapists?
What it really means there is, like, love your neighbor as yourself, and, like, it's to recognize that every human is an image of God, and when we use the translation love, right? But there's all different words for love. Like, I don't know I think it was probably agape, but I don't know what word was used. But, agape is to really participate in your being in kind of that boundary dissolution way,
Do you love your neighbor while he's being killed by Mexican immigrants?
You love your neighbor you love your neighbor even if he's shooting you. That's the Christian message, And to love God, you have to pursue God in a way, right? You end up having to figure out, that's how you organize and figure out what is ideal.
Yeah, I think we're talking in two different dimensions about this.
Well, I'm curious where you get hung up, to love your neighbor and love God. And
what does your task list look like?
I think it's different for everybody, but like you said,
of course, you'll discover it while loving your neighbor.
Yeah, I mean, like, those initiatory experiences might be helpful in this regard, to kind of put people on that path and, like, help them figure out what's right for them, But I do think, it's like, not everybody's called to have kids, for example,
That's for sure. Like, embody the truth wherever you go.
It's like I was saying, to love your neighbor regardless of the backlash, almost, And, it has to be not just like a farce, which is kind of how I had mentioned acting.
But as a Christian, then, do you have a responsibility for the world or not, for the planet?
I think so. It's to recognize that as who you are, and like, ultimately to love your neighbor as yourself, right? And of course, like, to truly, do that to the ultimate extreme, it's an intimidating ideal, But
Elon Musk is embracing that. You know what I mean? And
Peterson
recently said that
he's sacrificing all of his time, hopefully, for the furtherment of humanity, because he identifies.
So he's Christ.
I think he's Christian in some sense, but you could also say.
But is he then more Christian than someone who's just basically going about about their day and loving their neighbor and thinking about God? Or is he closer to Christ then?
I mean, if his stuff is like ultimately serving God's will, it's hard for me to kind of decide like whether or not Elon's working on for appropriately, but it's easier for me to.
But if you can choose between imitating someone who sits at home and loves their neighbor and someone like Elon Musk, like what's
loving your neighbor? You can't sit at home and love your neighbor. It doesn't. That's a contradiction. You have to get out there in the world.
Right. It just sounds so generic when I'm talking about your person. Anyways.
I'm not the best. I'm always not necessarily the best representation of this either. But hopefully that's what I strive to do. Like you asked for me personally, what does it mean to be Christ-like? That's what I'm trying to do. Is I'm trying to do the things that I just described. But it doesn't mean I'm the best at it.
Right.
But we are, God forgives our sins, our bad aim. I have bad aims sometimes.
For essentially like these quasi churches which have formed through online interaction to manifest themselves locally, which is also something that's happening to some extent.
Mm-hmm.